Hey everyone, we have Gareth Coker on with us this week. He is the composer of Ori and the Blind Forest, a fantastic game, and even better soundtrack. Gareth, how are you doing today?
I'm doing really good. It's nice to be on this podcast after jumping in randomly on your Twitch.
Yeah, that was so cool.
Ago.
And when you put it, you're like, "Hey, composer here of the soundtrack of this game." I was like, "Yeah, right."
I was modding. I was modding at the time. I'm like, whatever. And then we looked. Yeah.
We looked you up, and that was
blew
really
my
cool.
mind. Thank you for jumping in that stream. That was pretty fun. So
it happens. You guys are not the first, and probably not the last. Most of the Twitch streams, the developers jump into. It's not just been me. It's the sound team, the artists, the level designers. We've been jumping in, and there's always the initial. Are you really working on the game? And then I send them to Twitter, or they look it up and say, "Oh, that's cool."
You pop that collar and you say, "Don't you know who I am?" Kind of thing. Nice.
And I heard you in other interviews on Major Nelson actually just talk about how that's been a cool experience for you being on Twitch. Would you like to talk about that a little bit? What's it been like seeing people play your game and talking about your music?
Okay, well, here's the thing, right? So when I was in school, there wasn't anything like Twitch. There was no way to get an idea of a video game unless there was a demo. And now, I'm looking at this, and not only is it an amazing way to get an idea of a game, it's also probably the best form of feedback a developer can get, because it's one thing to watch people play the game, but most people broadcast their faces when they're doing their Twitch broadcast. So you can actually see if they're bored, if they're frustrated, if they're sad, if they're happy. Now, when we tested the game with Microsoft, we had that a little bit with them. We had this kind of creepy camera, watching the testers, to see how they react. But now we can just watch anyone play the game, and it's enjoyable to watch, but it's also good feedback for us too. So there's an educational aspect, and there's also a fun aspect to Twitch.
That's a great point. I never thought of it like that. And it's probably better than your group testing or your focused group testing, because it's people in their own environment, not knowing they're being watched by the developers of the game or the...
Exactly. And also, these people, generally speaking, they're not being paid by the developers. So it's what you're seeing is the true reaction, for sure.
Have you had anyone be just completely not like the game? Because everyone that we know really likes
like
the game.
it a lot.
Yeah,
Just so you know, I'm a fan.
Really
Huge
good
fan.
game.
So.
Have you had anyone just been that you've watched on Twitch just be like, "This is the dumbest game"? I would imagine that's probably a little frustrating.
I think the only thing that is fairly common, if I jump in and how far are you guys through the game? Have you finished it? Or...
No, I'm about 6.5 hours in.
I played the snot out of it last night.
Yeah.
I just passed the water tree going up.
Okay. Yeah, I feel like it's safe talking about that part, because that's a part that most people get to. You see people get to that bit, and I think that's the times when people swear the most at the game. So it maybe it is a little bit difficult, but I think up until then we haven't demanded too much from the player. It's really the first time. It's okay, you've really got to put everything you've learned together now. Yeah. And yeah, you die a lot, but what I say to people on that water sequence is you feel like you have to rush because the water is chasing you.
Yeah.
But actually, the key to getting through it is take your time. You actually have more time than you think. It's just your heart starts racing because the water's getting you, and then as you get closer to the end, you might make a bad decision because you're excited to reach the end. But the key to it is taking time. And so I watch people play it sometimes, and I'll just be like, take your time, take your time, it's okay.
Well, what's funny is when I was playing that, I really like the I'm a guy that likes 100% games, and I don't know if there's an achievement or not, but those little experience balls, up in the right, that's what was driving me crazy. And I like that. I'm a guy that likes Super Meat Boy, I like these hard platformers. I like 1001 Spikes, So whoever put those in there, I know they did it on purpose. They're like, hey, let's make it even harder for these for these guys that like pain. So no, yeah, that was really fun. I got frustrated, but I'm a fan of games that reward you, and I feel as though when I got to the top, I felt rewarded. So Very, very cool. I compliment the developers. I compliment you on that part, especially. So, yeah.
Thank you very much. I mean, that was a tough one. That was the first chase scene we actually did, and to get it all flowing properly was quite a technical challenge, because you got that epic chase and then it's got to go seamlessly into the cutscene that takes place after that, and then after about a minute of what takes place in the cutscene, I'm trying not to do spoilers, by the way.
You're doing a great job. This is good.
Then you wake up in the next area and it's got to have like a completely different feel with it, and this all takes place within like 2 to 3 minutes.
How did you deal with the transitions in music with that? Because there's no loading screens, so how do you do that
great
as a composer?
difficulty?
Oh, okay, cool. Check that one off. That's
so really, and actually the chase one isn't actually that difficult because, okay, a little developer tip here.
Oh, let me take notes. Okay.
One of the things you can do to cover up transitions is use sound effects.
Okay.
So when you get to the end of the water rushing scene, there's a big gush of water, and that actually covers up the musical transition, so you don't really notice it. And I actually think it could be even smoother than it is, but it's passable. It's in the game, so that's one way you can hide transitions. And actually, that's the best example, because there's a number of transitions in that scene and the following scene where we use a sound effect to end a musical cue, and then the next one can gradually come in. So other than that, it's all really about matching the harmonies of one piece of music from another. Like, you have to make sure that they're all related in some way. But then you've got to make it feel different. So then you've got to use different instruments and stuff like that to make it feel different. But the way to get it working well really is just to test, and test again. I must have played the game close to 1,000 hours. So, and that's before it was released.
Wow.
Well played.
So I know the game inside out, and I know most of the things that the players are going to do, so I can plan for all of the music stuff accordingly. And so that should result, hopefully, in a fairly seamless experience, made all the more challenging by the fact that, as you rightly noticed, there's no loading screens.
Yeah.
So when you're writing the music for a game, do you, for Ori in particular, do you play the game first and then write the music, or I mean, what is that process exactly? Do you just go off of artwork that is giving you concept art to come up with a theme, or how does that work?
Okay, so like here's where it was a real cool thing working with Moon Studios. So I've actually been part of the project for 4 years, since before Microsoft picked it up. So I did the music for the prototype. So I have seen it in every single form, including some forms that the public will hopefully never see. So at first, like I would say the first 2 years, I didn't actually write that much music. It was more like getting to grips with the game and the story, and getting a feel for like how the character moves. So we're well documented as saying we spent over 1.5 years, I think, on the controls alone, to get them feeling good. So initially I'd be playing Ori, and Ori would just be a square, and the levels would just be more squares, and the enemies might be a circle. So there's no art in the game, but the game was still fun to play. Because you don't, if you have good gameplay mechanics, then the art just can be built on top of all of that. It doesn't really change. So I was like, this is really fun to play early on. And then having a feel for how Ori moved gave me an idea of how much momentum to put in the music. Now, the next decision was how to get it to balance with sound effects. So we put some early temporary sound effects in before the actual sound team was hired. And we found out very quickly that the music didn't really need any percussion instruments. Like, if you listen to the soundtrack, there's not that much epic percussion, except in a couple of the chase scenes. Like, usually in action sequences, it's like drums, and more
the
drums.
The lava chase one, I was listening to that earlier.
Hey, spoilers! I haven't gotten there yet.
Well, that's on the soundtrack. I'm
Real
talking about
cool,
the soundtrack.
man.
Or Light of Nibel has lots of percussion that I like. But
okay, cool.
there you go.
But Light of Nibel plays during the end credits, so I can do
there.
it.
Well, I'm not there yet, but
Spoiler alert! Come on,
I don't mean to interrupt you, but that Light of Nibel is in my workout mix.
Oh.
It is that inspiring. Yeah, it's good for running. It's a good running song.
Cool.
Just
I mean,
FYI.
that's the end of the game, so it's supposed to be like the most epic form of the main theme, like everything comes together. So I'm glad that is, if it's in your workout mix, that means I kind of did my job.
Yes, you did. You
definitely
did.
did. Yeah.
So yeah, we found out that like Ori's attacks and footsteps were the percussion. So that made my job easier in many respects. Like, well, that removes like a section of the orchestra I don't have to consider as much. There's still a little bit in there, but it's a lot of games are quite percussion heavy at the moment. Like if you know, I'll do a good comparison. Like Dragon Age, it's a really good score, and it was actually recorded in the same place where we recorded Ori, and that's got a lot of percussion in it. It works for that game, but it wouldn't have worked. Something like that wouldn't have worked for Ori. So anyway, that was like how we got to balance music and sound, and then the artwork comes in, and some parts of the area are blue. Like there's one area which is very blue and very icy, and that means I'm going to choose instruments that are more metallic. So like bells and gongs and things like that. And the area that is blue and icy also is called the Forlorn Ruins. So I'm going to use instruments that sound cold and empty, and going to try and write something that feels cold and empty. Now, what cold and empty actually means, that's kind of my job to interpret in music. It's very difficult for like me to explain that in words, but hopefully it comes across in the music.
Well, and feeling.
It
I
does,
think.
and that's one of the things. I've been going to your SoundCloud and listening to a lot of your stuff. I'm very impressed. Your music seems very emotional. You know it, and how do you do that when you're saying, you know, it's hard to put into words that you feel your music, and if it's at all possible, how do you do that? You know, with a game like this, or any of the stuff that you've done in the past. You know.
I will do my best to explain, but it's one of those things that it's kind of indescribable.
Okay.
But here's like there's a couple of things like that I try to do when I'm writing. I mean, if I don't feel something when I'm listening to it, how on earth is anyone else going to feel something? You know, so because I'm the closest to it, so I'm probably going to be the most jaded by my own music. But if I'm actually feeling something from it, I'm like, okay, well, this might actually be good. The second thing. Okay, so the job of the composer, our job means we're usually in a dark room for like 10 to 12 hours a day, stuck in front of a computer, and we generally don't get out much. That's like the worst thing you can possibly do. The thing that helps artists create is actually doing stuff. So I've been lucky enough to live in lots of different countries, and I've traveled a lot, and I've done some cool stuff in my life, and I just draw on those experiences. I mean, everyone has life experiences they can draw on. It's like those things that you have to draw on and think about and see if you can find something in the game that relates to your own life experience, and then match it with the music. Now, how the actual technical part of turning all that into notes, I couldn't tell you.
Okay.
But I can tell you where it comes from.
Okay. Yeah, fascinating.
Yeah, that is fascinating. So let's talk doing stuff, right? Let's talk about gaming in particular.
Okay.
I mean, you're making music for video games. What's your gaming history? You're obviously a big fan of video games. When did you start? What systems have you owned? What's your favorite game? What's your gaming history?
Okay, well, so I started gaming on the ZX Spectrum, which you guys might not even know what that is.
No.
Yes.
We don't. Wow, that's awesome. I'm in.
So it's just a really old computer, similar to the Commodore 64.
Okay.
And you could either use cassettes to load the game. So you'd have to wait for like 30 minutes for the whole game to load.
That is so awesome.
If you go onto YouTube, there's actually videos of if you just type in ZX Spectrum, ZX Spectrum.
Yeah, thank you.
Sorry.
We're in America, so we don't know what Z
yeah,
is.
ZX. Sorry. Yeah, and you'll go onto YouTube and like basically you have to play a cassette tape for like 30 minutes and then the game has loaded.
Wow.
It's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
But also my dad bought me a book where you could like if you could type in all the code and then the game would play. And that's actually how I learned to type really quickly. And this is like at the age of 4 and 5. So at the age of 5, I just copied a bunch of text out of a book and then was playing Space Invaders 6 hours later.
Wow.
That is so awesome.
So this is in the days when graphics were done with binary code. So to draw a Space Invader, you'd have to make like an 1,000 square grid, and you'd type in lines where 1 was a pixel that would appear and 0 is a pixel that wouldn't appear. So that's like the very beginning of my gaming life. So technically, since I was 4, so that's 26 years. Then the games I really got into were the old Star Wars simulator games, Star Wars X-Wing, Star Wars TIE Fighter. I was really, really enjoying space simulation games. Then I went to boarding school and my gaming got cut down a lot because at boarding school there are no video games.
What a terrible
Really?
place.
Oh.
I will never go there.
It's not that the school was strict. They did have some, but it's like, it's like 3 hours a week, like kind of on a Saturday night.
Oh,
so,
wow.
I know boarding school isn't such a big thing in America, but it is quite a big thing in the UK. So I'd be away from home for 36 weeks of the year, and then the other 16 weeks I'd be at home. So I'm used to being away from home, but at boarding school, no time for video games. So most of my gaming was done during the holidays. As for, I'm going to just jump ahead, just to not alienate all your listeners with the really old games. So I find that I enjoy single-player games way more than multiplayer. I've resisted the Morpugs. I've never played World of Warcraft. I almost dipped into EVE Online. Almost.
Oh, we
It's
almost
not that
did
I
as
don't
well.
like. It's not that I don't like these games. It's just that there is no end to them, really.
That is true.
Yeah,
And
that's
for me,
my problem too. Yeah.
for me, like when I play something, I kind of want to have it a start, middle, and an end because I like storytelling. And I think like Ori is kind of the ideal game for me because I get to tell a story and there's hardly any dialogue in the game. So really, music gets to do a lot of the heavy lifting, which is really fun. I compare it to Wall-E, the film. The opening 40 minutes of Wall-E, there's no dialogue. So it's just music and animation telling the story. So those are the kinds of games I like playing. It's just single-player, story-driven experiences. So, and I'm not really limited to any genre on that. Like, I am quite happy playing Dead Space and really crazy, aggressive games. But also, on the other hand, I really enjoy Mark of the Ninja, which it's not as story-driven. It's more you will complete a level and then you'll get a nice, really beautiful cutscene and then you'll do another level. But the only multiplayer games I play are the ones I can play on the couch with my friends. So fighting games like Tekken. I love Tekken. Tekken Tag is my favorite. And I would consider myself to be pretty good at sports games. And here's one that might surprise your listeners. I'm actually pretty good at Madden. Despite being British, I love American football and I understand it very, very well.
We actually just finished with our community a Madden tournament, and there was a guy from Scotland that went really far. He destroyed me.
Didn't he go to the final round?
Yeah, he went to the finals actually. So so British people are well known in our community to go far in to be good at Madden.
I think British people just like the British people that do love football really love football.
They're like super fans.
You see the games sell out in England whenever the NFL goes to England every year. They sell out like within hours. So. Yeah, we love football. I mean, I love most of the American sports. I can't get into basketball because there's no defense. Everyone's just scoring all the time.
And you can't even goaltend. You know? You can't stop it. They shot it. Okay, let's see what happens. Yeah, I get that. Yeah, that's funny.
So what's your favorite single player game of all time?
Oh, wow.
This is a tough question, and you can do top 3. You know, you can bend
top
the
3
rules.
doesn't have to be.
You can bend the rules a little bit. He asks these to me all the time, and it's hard. I get it. It's hard. So
I'm gonna cheat a little bit because it's a trilogy, but like for me, Mass Effect.
Oh, good one. I was thinking
well
that.
Yeah.
Like the ending of the first one in particular. By the way, I had no problem with the ending of the trilogy. I thought they handled it really well. I'm not one of those people who was bummed out by the ending. Though I did play it after they released the free add-on, so maybe I never got like the original ending. But just the way, it was especially the way they handled dialogue. Mass Effect was the first game to make dialogue really, really good. Because let's be honest, most game dialogue is not up to the level of good film writing. Some of it,
sure.
and really the issue is actually flow. Like Mass Effect really got the flow right. The fact that you could choose your next response like slightly before the other person has finished their sentence. If you're having to wait for the other person to speak before you can choose, like it just feels like it takes forever to get through a dialogue section. Whereas in Mass Effect, it just all flows so naturally, and that made you want to ask every single question ever because they give you a lot of choices, and two, it just pushes you on to explore as much of the game as possible. It helps that it's graphically incredible. It helps that the gameplay is pretty solid, apart from in Mass Effect 1 that stupid buggy thing which is impossible to control on those planets. What's it called? The thing where you drive around and used to mine.
The Planet Roadrunner or whatever,
right.
the crawler thing. Oh, I know exactly what you're talking about. I don't know. I tried to forget those things. So
that was like the only annoying part of the game. So yeah, the Mass Effect series.
Good call. Good choice.
Let me jump into my Steam library, which is very large.
I love it. He's got Steam on call. This is my kind of guy.
So I'm just going to look. Oh, okay. So they're not all up to the same level, but I love the Assassin's Creed games, and Assassin's Creed 2 in particular, I think is the pinnacle of the series, because they took everything that Assassin's Creed 1 did right, improved on it, and then added more variety. And just I love all the history and stuff. Like
they nail the time periods. They get the most interesting time periods, whether it's the Revolutionary War or pirates or Spain, or Italy or
whale hunting.
Whale hunting is a good time, but they nail those time periods.
It's just fun entering those worlds. Like the games that really help create another world and get you immersed in it. Here's a similarity in film. My favorite film director is Ridley Scott, because he is amazing at creating worlds. Now, and the films where he doesn't get to create worlds are not his best films. But like American Gangster, he creates old school New York really well. Obviously, Blade Runner, Gladiator, like all of these films that he does, they create worlds. So the games that I like are the ones where worlds are created. Another one, the Deus Ex Human Revolution. Or do you call it Deus Ex? Sorry, my pronunciation is way different.
That's okay. I was like translating.
I was like in my head, what is that game?
But yeah, Human Revolution was just like, it really felt like you were in the future, and even the original game, like that game was well ahead of its time as well. The original Deus Ex, and again, it's another story-driven game, and there's so much for you to do. So yeah, that's a few of them. I mean, I've played a lot of games though. Like I look at how many have I completed in Steam? I have a completed folder.
Nice. Oh, you're organized.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Because mine
I have to move them so they don't clutter up my uncompleted list, which is way big, by the way.
He's a man with goals. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I mean, there's like 150 here that are actually finished. Unfortunately, there's like 300 more to go, which I'll never, ever finish because I go mad on the Steam
sales.
It's
those sales. They get you. Every summer, they get you.
And Christmas
and every time, and it's like I have to get that. I'm trying to.
It's only $2. It's only $2.
I have to. The sales at the store. This is the same thing.
Yeah. So Gareth, we had some listeners submit some questions for us.
Awesome.
Jordan.
So our one of our listeners, Joe Van Egbert, he wants to know, what was the first concert you ever went to?
Oh,
that is an amazing question.
it's awesome. Yeah.
That is like totally not what I was expecting. So you've actually caught me off guard.
Good.
So this is going to be back to boarding school days because I didn't really go to concerts until I was like 9 or 10. And we had a bunch of school trips. Sorry, I'm really having to dig back into memory banks right now.
We could also change it to favorite concert. Maybe.
Yeah, favorite concert.
No, he's asked me, and I'm gonna find the answer. I'm gonna remember.
Okay.
I believe I didn't enjoy it because it was opera, but it was a school trip. So I was like, who doesn't want to go on a school trip when they're 9 years old? You know, it's like, because I knew I was going to get like an awesome meal because the teachers would like buy us an awesome meal instead of terrible boarding school food. So I believe it was Don Giovanni, which is an opera by Mozart. And I hated it. I still it was, and it's long. So, I mean, most operas are long period. Now, the best concert, wow, it's tough. Because I live in LA now.
Yeah.
So it's like
there's a
music
concert
is
every
so
night.
easy to find. I'm going to do a couple. And it was actually the reason why it was good also because it was like the second date with my current girlfriend. This was actually 4 years ago, so we've been together 4.5 years. We went to the Hollywood Bowl to watch a Tchaikovsky concert, and they did the 1812 Overture, which is his most famous piece, I would say. But it combined the Los Angeles Philharmonic Orchestra with the University of Southern California marching band. So it's like 60 brass. And they're all on stage, and it's done in sync to fireworks.
Oh, that's
awesome.
cool. That's
cool.
really cool.
And I was like, this is a pretty epic date.
That is awesome.
So that one is obviously memorable. And last year, I went to see Arcade Fire in Santa Barbara, and I'm not really a rocker. I generally rather go and see a classical concert rather than like a hardcore rock concert. But one, Arcade Fire aren't that hardcore. Two, Santa Barbara is full of people that drink wine. So the crowd is a little bit less crazy than had we gone to see it in central LA.
Yeah.
And it was just a really good time. They're really amazing live. And there's a lot of them. So there's a lot to look at on stage rather than just like 3 or 4 guys. It's like 11. So that was a really good concert.
Awesome.
So I hope that answered his question.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then we got Brian Shipley. He would like to know if there's any upcoming games that you would like to compose for.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, we're at the hard hitting questions now. So
Well, I'm not going to lie. I would give an awful lot to be able to compose for the next Mass Effect game.
Oh,
So
that would be cool.
I mean, that's the funny thing, right? It's like right now I'm going to be, known as the guy who does the fantasy, emotional, orchestral thing. But you go to my SoundCloud, it's filled with epic electronic stuff.
I know. I love it. I was going through it all. I absolutely love your stuff. I actually have it on here right on my phone because I was listening to Recoil Suite. I love that song. Is that?
That was for a short sci-fi film that I did. I'm actually meeting up with that director this week. Yeah.
Sci-fi, perfect for Mass Effect.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, plug
Right.
them.
Yeah.
Very good stuff.
Yeah, I would love to work on a Mass Effect game, and I'd also love to work on an Assassin's Creed game, just because you really get to work in a historical period, and there's so you get to study that period of history and try and bring that era into a modern soundtrack. Like if you look now, I know Assassin's Creed Unity was beset with a bunch of problems, but the production values on Assassin's Creed games have never been doubted. Like they're always top notch, and the music's no different. Like the music that plays in almost all the Assassin's Creed games, it just feels like you're there. Like this is the music of that time. And again, we've talked about it already. They're so ridiculous and over the top. The music for the Madden games, just the background music, it's just like it's the marching band with rock stuff.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
Who doesn't want to do that? If you're a composer, like you're crazy if you don't want to do that at least once. So, and they make a Madden every year, so I've actually got a pretty good chance of being able to.
Yeah, that's true.
Your odds are there.
That's true.
All right, so next question is from Peter Hernandez. He would like to know who your 3 major musical influences are.
Okay. Fortunately, I've been asked that quite a few times recently. So I've this isn't a they kind of change on a day-to-day basis. But okay, so I'll do classical music first because that's the easiest one. So my favorite classical composer is Ravel, and that's mainly because the way he writes for the orchestra informs most current film music and game music today. Just his style of writing. It's an especially rich orchestral sound. Like most of the soundtracks you hear today were at some point, like you can trace the roots back to Ravel.
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
So if ever you see Ravel on a classical music concert, you should go watch and listen to it because I can almost guarantee it's accessible classical music.
Really? Awesome.
Yes,
Good to
that's
know.
what I would say.
Where's my pen? I'm going to write that down. Okay. Ravel. Didn't mean to cut you off. Sorry. I just get excited about this stuff.
So I'll jump to a film composer. Oh, man, this is tough. There's so many good film composers. But because it's the score that resonated with me the most and it fit the film like a glove, one of my favorite composers to listen to is Michael Danner. Now, he's not such a household name, but most people, I would imagine, have seen Life of Pi.
Oh, yeah.
And the soundtrack for Life of Pi is just incredible. And he won the Oscar for it. So that film and its soundtrack was actually quite a big reference for Ori, not in terms of like the actual music, but for how it elevated the picture, like, and how it connected with the picture and like elevated each scene emotionally. Because Life of Pi, there is dialogue, but a lot of the more spiritual scenes are driven solely by music and visuals. So it was quite a good reference for us. And while we're on the topic of mixing music and visuals, the Japanese composer Joe Hisaishi, he writes all the music for the Studio Ghibli films. So Princess Mononoke, Spirited Away. His music's absolutely incredible.
Yeah.
And then I'll do one game composer. Again, there's so many good ones. So I'm going to pick one that your listeners might be less familiar with. He's a French composer, Olivier de Rivière, and he did the music for Remember Me, which also is probably one of the most underrated games ever. It has an incredible soundtrack. It balances a full orchestra with weird electronic glitch effects. And I strongly just go to YouTube, type in Remember Me soundtrack, listen to that soundtrack, and it's one of those soundtracks that, for me, it made me buy the game. I was like, what is this? I've never heard anything like this before. And the game is actually really awesome. Like, the knock on the game is that the gameplay is a little bit shallow. I strongly disagree with it. In terms of visuals, you will not have seen anything really as good as Remember Me. Like, it looks as good as most stuff now.
Really?
And it'll probably be on a Steam sale for like $5 in a couple of months. So
I'm there. Perfect.
You had me at Steam sale. So.
He also did the music for Assassin's Creed Freedom Cry, which was the Black Flag expansion, I think. Yeah, he's a really versatile composer. So he is, I think, one of the next big things in video game music. He just needs to be the lead on a really big project. But every time he does something, he always blows me away. So check out his work. And he's French, so he has taste.
Yeah, good. Absolutely. He drinks the wine. He's that guy. So cool.
So the next question is from Ben Hatch. He wants to know, how long are your scores before they are cut down to fit in a section in the game, and do you help create the loop so the music fits?
I think I saw this question, but this question may have come from Twitter or someone else.
It did come from Twitter. Yes.
Yeah, I think I saw
He got
this.
the heads up. We should have started with this one.
Yeah.
Right. So, oh my goodness. So cutting the soundtrack for the digital release, right? That was writing the music is hard, but then you've got to cut things because okay, I'll explain first the reason why I cut things. So the soundtrack is about 150 minutes long, like in the game. The digital release is 89 minutes. So I get a bunch of people saying, why isn't such and such a track included on the soundtrack? And it's because I wanted to make the soundtrack a good listening experience. Like, you play Ori, right? And everything kind of flows seamlessly. I wanted the soundtrack to be the same thing. And the fact is, if you listen to all the tracks back to back in the game, it's not a good listen. Like, there's too many softer, slower tracks, and it kind of breaks up the momentum. When you listen to an album, like, a good album is not just about each individual song, it's about how one track flows into another. So that was my thinking behind cutting the music. Now, that process is quite hard, but for example, one easy bit was cutting the music that takes place in the last general area. Now, again, I'm going to try not to spoil this, but basically, the last area, there's like a main hub room, and then there's 8 mini rooms connected to the hub, and you have to solve each mini room to finish the hub. Okay. Now, each mini room has its own individual music. And they're all variations on a similar theme, so why would I include 8 variations on the soundtrack? Instead, I include 2, and the 2 most differing ones, and that generally covers the bases. Then the harder cuts are where you have to, like, so for example, in the Ginzo tree, which is the area where you have to, just before the water rushing scene takes place, there's about 15 minutes of music there in the game, but I cut it down to like 5 or 6 in the soundtrack, because there's like 5 different pieces of music that play there, but I kind of wanted them to flow into each other a little bit better, and so you don't have to hear the whole thing on the soundtrack. I just wanted to make it a briefer listen, because if you listen to each loop individually, it's going to take you 15 minutes, and 15 minutes in the same world on a soundtrack is totally different to experiencing it in the game. So, wow, I'm taking a really long time to answer this question. As for the loops, I did all of that. So cool. I did all of the preparation for the implementation, and then I gave it to our WizKid programmers. See, one of the great things about Ori is that we did everything over Skype. I don't know if you guys know that the game was developed without a centralized studio.
Yeah, I knew that you had people in different parts of the world, right?
Yeah. So that has both its advantages and disadvantages, but one of the cool things is just being able to say, hey, Willem was basically the audio wizard. Hey, can you set this up for me in this way? And it's like, yeah, just let me type in the code to do that. And it's like 10 or 15 minutes of work for him. And then I can test the music myself. So I did all the prep work, asked the programmers to do stuff, and then tested the music files in the game. And the programmers never did anything wrong. The only times when I would say they did something wrong was usually because I gave them the wrong instructions.
Don't admit that, though. You know.
Yes, I can blame the program.
Yeah, there you go.
But that meant I could test and test. I was talking about testing earlier. It's just like I can make sure that things work exactly how I want them. So really, the only limit to how the music works in game was my imagination. And if I wanted to do something, I'd just be like, hey, can you code this for me? And they might complain if it's difficult, but coding music in a game and getting music to trigger in the right place is like the easiest thing that they can do compared to some of the other stuff that they have to do. I mean, you've played the game, you've seen how many effects there are in the game, and people ask us a lot, like, why is this game so demanding? It's just a 2D game, like, and our artists and especially the programming team kind of cringe when they hear that because there are so many layers of art that have to be rendered. Then you've got all the effects on top that give Ori its unique look. Like, if you compare Ori with another 2D platformer, let's compare it with the other really good-looking one, Rayman Legends, right? Oh, yeah. They are both really good-looking, but they have a totally different aesthetic to them. Mm-hmm. Like, Ori's is slightly smoother, whereas Rayman's is more of a sharp cartoon. And they're both really good, but they have a different feel to it. Yeah. And there's so many different processes going on. Like, that's a lot for them to optimize. So for our programmers, like, doing the music implementation is a piece of cake.
Really? Wow.
Cool.
I didn't know that. That's interesting.
Yeah. Jordan right here, he's getting into programming.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So
He's
going
excited to
school
hear
for
stuff
it. Yeah,
like that.
I like that. I find it interesting. So.
Oh yeah. So
Was that all? I think that was all our questions.
Yeah,
from
those are
our
all fan
listeners.
questions. With
yeah. Oh, you want to, should I ask a
Yeah,
question?
go ahead.
I wrote a question.
Okay.
What are some of the greatest challenges you faced, and did you have any unexpected challenges? And maybe you've already mentioned this, but on top of that, any unexpected benefits from anything that you went through in this process? You said you've done 4 years of doing this and things like that. Did I explain myself okay? Does that question make sense?
I got it. I'll do it in like 2 parts. The challenge one is easy. So
okay. It was hard, and then
right. So the biggest challenge by far was the prologue, which is the opening 10 minutes of the game. So the reason why that's different, you've probably all played the prologue, so like you've all at least gotten that far.
I don't mean to cut you off, but that I have to say is one of the most emotional intros to a game that I've played. I mean,
not only that, but it was basically the prologue was shown at E3.
Yeah, last
if I'm not
year,
mistaken,
right?
and that's really what got us interested in the game.
Right.
Well,
Right.
and the score for that trailer just blew my mind.
Yeah.
I mean, I was into that music before I even played the game because of that E3 trailer too. So I just wanted to mention my compliments on how great that opening sequence was, and the music tying me into it. And I played it with my wife, and we were like, don't cry. It's so good. I didn't mean to cut you off, but I just wanted to let you know how amazing that was. So
Well, it comes back to that theme of like it's something that everyone can relate to. Like, you know, we all have parental figures in our life, and even if you don't choose for Naru to be a parental figure, it could be someone that you looked up to. You know, like everyone's always asking us like, what is Ori and what is Naru, and like they're whatever you want to be. Like I won't even commit to a gender for Ori, like because Ori can be a he or a she. It doesn't even matter. So like that scene that you're talking about, it's like, you know, everyone can connect with that. And I think that's one of the reasons why it's powerful. And for the same reason that the opening montage of Up is powerful. You know, I hope you've seen Up.
we met.
Yeah,
yes.
we actually in our
talked about
podcast
it, yeah.
yesterday
We
talked
Right.
about
we
how
compared those.
Yeah, how it's similar. It tugs at your heartstrings.
Yeah.
You know, the other moment, Lion King. You know, Simba loses his dad. You know, it's like, you know, these are all. It's one thing like. To look at these things and use them as references, of course, then you've got to actually execute it, and that's the challenge. And the real challenge in the prologue, it is like a short film, but you've all played it. It dips in and out of being interactive. Like sometimes you have control, sometimes you don't. So you've got to take, as a composer, you've got to take that into account. Like someone might stop and get a cup of coffee or they might just like stop in the same area just to take screenshots. I'm sure a lot of people are doing that, especially in the prologue. So how do you take into account them and keep the music feeling like it's moving forward and make sure it's not repetitive and give it a melody and make it all seamless and make it emotional?
Yeah.
Wow.
That's like all of the problems I had to solve with the prologue. I look at this stuff now and I'm like, how did I do that? I don't even remember like the process like of doing it. And honestly, I think it was just a lot of trial and error. Like this game is a result of a lot of trial and error. And you know, we never got into trouble because like you know, we did something bad. We were encouraged to make mistakes. It's like it's okay to make mistakes. Like you can't really learn anything if you don't make mistakes. It's like, okay, this is terrible. Try again. Try something different. Like Thomas, our director, like trusted us to find the solutions eventually. And when you have that trust from your director, it gives you a lot of freedom to create. And that's not just for me; it's for the art team and the animation team. And the prologue, it took us 8 months, not of solid work, but you know, we would do little bursts on it because if you're working on the same thing the whole time, it just gets tedious and you get annoyed by it. So we'd address it for a couple of weeks, then we'd go away from it, then we'd address it, and eventually we got to the point where we're like, okay, this is kind of flowing well. Now, when we got to the point where it was flowing well, we were like, okay, now what can we cut? So originally the prologue was about 20 minutes long, but that's too long. Like you get an amount of goodwill from someone who's spent $20 on your game. Like they're going to play through probably for an hour, but they're going to start to get frustrated if they're not like actually doing cool stuff like after 10 or 15 minutes. Because for the prologue, you're really just pushing forward on the controller and pressing jump a couple of times.
Yeah.
And you can get away with that for a certain amount of time, but I feel like the prologue, right as it is right now, is exactly the right length. So once we got it into a place where it was feeling good, then we cut it, and then you get to the result where we are now. Now, the cutting part was annoying because then I had to reconsider all of the music and make it flow all over again. So you do all that work, and then some of it gets thrown out, and then it's like, oh my goodness. But we got there in the end. So that was by far the biggest challenge. But then you see the reward. And I'm going to tie this back into Twitch. Like, I've watched a bunch of people cry during the prologue, and part of me is like, man, I feel bad for making that person cry, but I also feel I also feel awesome for making that person cry because it means we did our job. You know?
Absolutely.
And the goal is not to make people cry. The goal is to make people feel something.
Yeah.
And the majority of people who've played the prologue probably felt something during that period. I also think, and this is something I implore people to do, like, when you sit down to play a video game, you got to make sure you're in the right environment. Like, when you're playing a sports game, like, cool, have your friends over, like, have a beer, whatever, just like make some noise to have some fun. You're playing a game like Ori, that's probably not the right environment to be playing in. And I remember being at E3 last year, and the game is being played at the LA Convention Center, and I'm like, this is totally the wrong environment to be. We've got Sunset, so it's like Ori, and then there's Sunset Overdrive like 10 meters away. It's like you could not have. And Sunset Overdrive like had a way bigger stand, and like the speakers were blaring and everything.
Well, it's like
and
the ultimate party game.
Right.
Yeah.
It's not really the right vibe to play Ori, but you play Ori in a dark room on a big screen with a nice sound system. If you're not getting immersed into that, then your heart is made of stone. So that ties into your question. Like, the biggest reward, honestly, is watching other people experience and get something from the game. I mean, I watched a professional gamer play the game on Twitch the other day. I think his YouTube channel is like Day 9. His name's Sean.
Day 9.
Anyway,
Sean,
you might know. Okay,
he's a StarCraft 2 player. He's awesome. I love that guy. Yeah, cool.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I don't know what his background is, but apparently it was a big deal that he was playing Ori. So
yeah, he's a big boy. He's a big guy. So yeah, that's cool.
So, but he was crying, like, and he was like, man, I have to go get my cat now. So for him, like the connection that he made was like, the animal that he loves a lot. So it's like, that's what it was for him. Like, that was the first thing he did when the credits rolled, was go and get his cat, which he loves very much. And when you're seeing people respond in that way on Twitch, like, that is the greatest reward you can get as a developer of a game. It's like, because I'll compare it with film. You never get to see that because everyone's sitting in a darkened room. Like, you never get to see people react. Like, I get to watch my roommates play, and I get to watch my girlfriend play because it's all new to them. I will never get that first time experience. And the reason why Twitch is so awesome is because I'm watching a bunch of people get that first time experience. Have any of you reached the gravity section of the game?
I haven't, not yet.
No.
Okay.
We're not very good. So.
Okay. So this is sort of a mini spoiler, but
Okay.
it's not really, because we put it in trailers because we're very proud of the mechanic. But there's an area of the game where gravity shifts, basically. So you're walking up walls and upside down and stuff like that. This is in the trailers, so I'm not really spoiling too much. But that's a really heavy puzzle-driven area of the game. There's not so many monsters there. And I watched one girl the other day. She was stuck on this section for an hour, and she was like, I am not stopping until I figure this out. And then finally the penny dropped, like, and then she had the aha moment, like, and it was the exact same like feeling that I had when I figured out like how to solve the puzzle for the first time. I was like, when you watch people have those aha moments, like, I don't know, it just fills me with joy. And that's why we drop in on Twitch streams, because the chances are we have quite a few aha moments in the game. The game is I don't know why we've been criticized for it being short by a few media outlets, because the game is still like 10 to 12 hours long, and it's a $20 game, so it's like, come on.
Well, and I think similar games like Child of Light was 6 hours. I think I beat it in. Like that's a pretty short game.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
But there's enough of these moments. It's like the chances are of us dropping in on someone and they're about to get to a cool scene or a difficult level or a difficult puzzle are pretty high. So that means we get a chance to watch this pretty frequently. And Xbox One does a great job of the Twitch streams are so easy to access. I mean, that's how I found you. You were the top broadcaster that evening. You had the most viewers on it, and I was like, okay, well, let's just go on that one because it literally just come out. And I was like, okay, let's click on that one, say hi. And here we are now.
Yeah, exactly.
Pretty cool.
That is cool. That's got to be rewarding, I think, to see someone
emotionally, like day 9
connected.
He has these cats in his room, and I watch him all the time, and it's cool you brought him up. But it's with me, it was my wife, and we're playing that interesting together, and to just feel the emotion from the music, from the game, the parent character or whatever. The fact that Day 9 went and got his cats, and he loves his cats. He really does. They're always clawing all over him. So that's awesome that you get to see that with Twitch and to live
experience,
kind of a thing.
That's got to be rewarding.
Cool. Thank you for sharing that. That's pretty cool.
No problem.
I think that's a good place probably to end this. We have one last question that you probably saw on Twitter. It's from Makana Royale of Gamer Life Podcast. He wants to know, are there talks of Ori and the Blind Forest 2?
Well, can you talk about this?
Yeah.
I cannot confirm or deny. But I'll say this. You can draw your own conclusions from the reviews the game has received.
Okay. Excellent.
Okay.
Good answer.
Well, let's just say I'm excited then.
I might be excited, and I might not.
Yeah, excellent. Anyways, thank you so much, Gareth Coker, for being on the show with us. If you want to contact him, follow him on Twitter. He's at Gareth Coker. Is there anything you're working on that people can check out, or where else can people check you out?
I mean, Twitter is going to be a good place from now on. I really like using Twitter to connect with people. So, I will generally, anyone who tags me, I will generally try and respond to. I have a project which is actually probably going to be announced in the next month or so, and it's totally the opposite. It's like this really small indie game. Ironically, it's a multiplayer game, but it's totally over the top and zany. It could not be more different to what Ori is. So that is coming up in the next month. It'll be announced. I think they're trying to get it out for this summer. I can't say what it is right now because it hasn't been announced yet. But that's that'll be on my Twitter in due course.
And is it coming on the Xbox One?
You know what? I think so. I think they actually just got it confirmed to be on the. I think it'll be on both Xbox One and PS4. I know for sure it's coming on PC.
Okay.
But I think they literally just got their approval to be on both platforms.
Excellent.
So. Awesome. We'll have to have you back on to talk about it when it's announced.
Cool.